Coming live from Miami, Florida, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for watching another episode of All Sports. This is your host, Gerardo. So today I'm going to be talking about MLB All-Star festivities. I'm going to start off by talking about the Home Run Derby and who won the Home Run Derby. I'm going to talk about the All-Star Game, which team won the All-Star Game and who won the MVP. Then I'm going to get into NBA free agency and tell you about the other moves that have happened around the NBA as well. To start off, I'm going to talk about the Home Run Derby that happened last week. So there were a bunch of different players that participated in the Home Run Derby. We had Jesus Aguilar from the Milwaukee Brewers, Hawkins. We had Alex Bregman from the Houston Astros, Kyle Schwarber from the Chicago Cubs, Bryce Harper, the hometown hero from the Washington Nationals, Freddie Freeman from the Atlanta Braves, Javier Baez from the Chicago Cubs, and Max Muncy from the Los Angeles Dodgers. So the All-Star Game festivities took place in Washington, D.C., and Bryce Harper got to participate in the Home Run Derby as well as the All-Star Game. He was a starter for the National League as well. So now I'm going to tell you who participated in the Home Run Derby. I'm going to tell you every player that was in the Home Run Derby, how many home runs that they hit in each round, who advanced into the next rounds, and who made it into the finals, and who won the Home Run Derby this year. So Jesus Aguilar went against Hawkins in the first round. Aguilar had 12 home runs, Hawkins had 17 home runs, and Hawkins landed up beating Aguilar and advancing to the semifinals with 20 home runs. Alex Bregman went against Kyle Schwarber in the first round. Bregman had 15 home runs, Schwarber had 16 home runs. Kyle Schwarber landed up advancing to the semifinals with 21 home runs. Freddie Freeman went against Bryce Harper in the first round. Freeman had 12 home runs. Harper had 13 home runs. Bryce Harper landed up advancing to the semifinals with 13 home runs. Javier Baez went against Max Muncy. Baez had 16 home runs. Muncy had 17 home runs. Max Muncy landed up advancing to the semifinals with 12 home runs. So in the semifinals, Hawkins went against Schwarber. Hawkins had 20 home runs. Schwarber had 21 home runs. Kyle Schwarber landed up advancing to the finals with 18 home runs. Muncy went against Harper in the semifinals. Muncy had 12 home runs, Harper had 13 home runs, and Bryce Harper landed up advancing to the finals with 13 home runs. Now in the finals, you had Kyle Schwarber of the Chicago Cubs going up against Bryce Harper, the hometown hero of the Washington Nationals. Originally for the finals, I picked Freddie Freeman to make it to the finals and to win the Home Run Derby. I really didn't expect that Bryce Harper would advance to the finals and even win the Home Run Derby. So I was a little bit surprised there. But Schwarber had 18 home runs. He went against Harper, and Harper landed up beating him at the last second with 19 home runs. So Bryce Harper, your hometown hero of the Washington Nationals, landed up winning the 2018 Home Run Derby in Washington, D.C. So congrats to Bryce Harper. So now I'm going to talk about the All-Star Game. So every year the All-Star Game is really great. For many years, the American League has been beating the National League almost every year. So the American League has a really good team, and so does the National League. They both have really good players, but if you really dig in deep and go in depth of the two rosters, a lot of the better players are on the American League, and they have more players compared to the National League. So that's usually the case why they win the All-Star Game every year. They just have the hitters, they got the pitchers, they got the relievers. So it makes sense why the American League always wins all the time. But anyway, so The All-Star game was really good. The 2018 Major League All-Star game was played in Washington, D.C. this year. It was great to see all these players that were voted in by the fans, by you, by other players and coaches around baseball. They all deserve to be in the All-Star game. There's many other players that didn't make it to the All-Star game or the festivities that should have been in the festivities, and they should have participated in the All-Star game as well. But at the end of the day, the really good ones were there. And the other thing too is there's some that should have been starters. But at the end of the day, just because of the way the vote counting went, other players started over them. But in my opinion, there should have been some of the players that weren't starters should have been starters. Some of the players that didn't even make it to the festivities should have participated. There should have been other players in the All-Star game as well and in the Home Run Derby, but we'll just have to wait and see if they can make it in next year. And there's always another chance for them to make it in the following year as well. But to start off with the All-Star game, it was a really great game. So the All-Stars in this year's All-Star game, they actually broke a record. There were 10 home runs hit between the American League and the National League. That actually broke a previous record of 6 that was set back in 1951. So it's been a while since that record has been broke. But that was something great to see, and then there was a lot of home runs and a lot of good players that hit these home runs as well. So this game actually went to the 10th inning. It's not like previous All-Star games where it went many innings after the 9th inning and we were watching the game all night. Like if you watched the All-Star game back in 2008 in New York, it just kept going inning after inning. Ended up going really late into the night, but it was such a great All-Star game. This one was great as well, but it only went to the 10th inning. It would have been nice to see it go a little bit further. But anyway, in the top of the 10th, the American League was up at bat, and Ross Stripling of the Dodgers was on the mound pitching, and George Springer and Alex Bregman of the Houston Astros came up to bat, and both Springer and Bregman of the Astros went back-to-back. They hit back-to-back home runs, which at the time, at the end of the 9th inning, the game was tied at 6-6. And once the 10th inning came and Springer and Bregman went back-to-back, then they were able to gain a lead of 8-6 in the top of the 10th. So both Springer and Bregman gave the American League the lead late in the game, and it landed up being that the American League once again won the All-Star game. It was 8-6, and Alex Bregman of the Houston Astros was your MVP of the 2018 All-Star game. This year was a great All-Star game, Home Run Derby, and festivities. So next year, the All-Star festivities will be in Cleveland, Ohio at Progressive Field. So if you missed out on these festivities or any of the games this year, next year you can watch the games when they're in Cleveland at Progressive Field. So the festivities is always good. It's always something great to watch. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it when they do it next year in Cleveland to watch. Every year, the Midsummer Classic takes place in the middle of July, so just keep that on your calendar. And if you do not vote in your favorite players, I highly recommend it, because that's how they get in the All-Star game. That's how they become a starter as well. So there's many players that deserve to be in the festivities, so make sure next year you vote them in. Another thing about the All-Star game is all these players from other teams or from the other league, they all get to interact with each other. And since the season's so long and the schedule's really tight and the amount of games that you play, you really don't have time to talk or interact with other players on other teams, especially if it's a player on a team that's in the other league, like the American League compared to the National League, or the National League compared to the American League. So you don't get to see them all the time. And if you're in the same league, then you get to see them every year, but you may only see them once or twice if you're not a division team. But if you're a division team, then you can see them a few times. So the All-Star festivities is where you get to interact and talk to other players, make new friends, or connect with other people, or catch up. So if you look back at the All-Star game, as we all know, the Major League trade deadline is coming up on July 31st. And there's been a lot of moves that have been taking place since the All-Star festivities. And if you look back at the All-Star game, Manny Machado and Matt Kemp were on the field together, and they took a picture together, and that highly recommended that Manny Machado was on the move to the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Machado was in his final year of his contract with Baltimore, and we knew that Baltimore really wasn't going to have a good season. So we knew that since Machado didn't get moved this past off season, he was going to get moved either at the trade deadline or this off season. But once Machado took that picture with Matt Kemp in the All-Star game, that kind of just sealed the deal, and it was already rumored, and that just gave it away that Machado was going to the Dodgers, which that actually took place the very next day. Manny Machado got traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. So with the trade deadline coming up at July 31st, I would stay tuned, and because there's going to be a lot of potential big name players that are going to be on the move. There's going to be a lot of players that are going to be moving from their team that they're on right now, and they're going to be going to a team that's contending for a playoff spot. So if you look at the American League, whoever's leading their division is highly going to win their division. The wild card has a few teams that are kind of contending for those two spots, but it's kind of set in stone, like who's going to win the division, who's going to probably win the wild card in the American League. But if you look at the National League, right now it's very competitive in every single division. You definitely got races in every division. The East is very tight with the Phillies, the Braves, and the Nationals. The Central is very tight with the Brewers and the Cubs. And if you look at the West, it's actually a 4-team race. You got the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, the Giants. And then you can also look at the wild card in the National League too. That's like a 6-team race right now, and there's only 2 spots. When it comes to September, whoever plays better baseball is going to be the 2 teams that make it in. And definitely in the National League, there's going to be some teams that fall very short of making the playoffs just because of how competitive it is for those 2 wild card spots. There's races in all 3 of these divisions for who's going to win their division. Then if you don't win the division, then you're going to have to compete for the wild card spot. So whoever plays better baseball is going to be the one making it into the playoffs in September, and whoever doesn't, they're going to fall short of the playoffs. So we'll have to wait and see. The baseball season is not over yet. This is when the races start. This is when good baseball is going to be played. So stay tuned for the remainder of the season as well. Moving on now, I'm going to talk about the NBA free agency. There's been a lot of moves that have happened, and a lot of big names that have been on the move these last few days. Free agency is almost ready to close, and then in a couple months the NBA season is going to get ready to start. Training camp, preseason, and the regular season in the fall, but we're still a little bit a ways from there. But right now I'm going to tell you about the moves that have been taking place. So I was a little bit surprised about this, but Kawhi Leonard, we all know that his time in San Antonio is coming to an end, but at first it looked like he was going to be going to the Los Angeles Lakers, like that was for sure, but things have been changing these last few weeks, and Kawhi Leonard is going to be traded to the Toronto Raptors. There's other players that are going to be involved, like Danny Green. And then, actually, I was surprised about this. DeMar DeRozan will be traded from the Toronto Raptors to the San Antonio Spurs. So basically, if you just look at the big names, Toronto got Kawhi Leonard, San Antonio got DeMar DeRozan. I was a little bit surprised about this move, but at the end of the day, we'll just have to wait and see how these teams play. From looking at this trade, because I think it's kind of a weird trade in my opinion, San Antonio probably won this trade by getting a really good player like DeMar DeRozan. Kawhi Leonard may not start the very first game when the season starts. He may be having to sit out a few weeks or a few months. He may not be ready at the start of the season, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But at the end of the day, I think San Antonio won this trade. So the Dallas Mavericks have Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk Nowitzki is their franchise player. He's one of the best players to ever play in the NBA. He's definitely a top 20 player of all time. So the Dallas Mavericks, even though Dirk Nowitzki's career is coming to an end pretty soon, they don't want to let go of him. So they are going to be keeping him. The 40-year-old Dirk Nowitzki and the Dallas Mavericks are finalizing a one-year deal worth $5 million to keep him. So Dirk Nowitzki is guaranteed one more season. This might be the last season of Dirk Nowitzki. I thought last season would be, so I was going to the Dallas Mavericks games because I kind of thought that Dirk Nowitzki's career was coming to an end last season, but we get one more year of Dirk Nowitzki. If you have not seen what Dirk Nowitzki has done as a player, I highly recommend that you look him up. He's one of the best to ever play basketball, for sure, so he's definitely one of my favorite players, so I'm glad to see him for one more year. So a few weeks ago, I told you that the Oklahoma City Thunder were wanting to part ways with Carmelo Anthony. So a few days ago, they parted ways with Carmelo Anthony, sending him to the Atlanta Hawks on a 3-team deal involving the Philadelphia 76ers. They had to do a 3-way trade to move Carmelo Anthony. The Atlanta Hawks will buy out and waive Carmelo Anthony, which at that point he will be able to pick and join whatever team he wants, which will likely be a contender that will contend for the playoffs and possibly make it to the NBA Finals. There are a few teams that have the lead in their front runners of acquiring Carmelo Anthony. His first choice would be the Houston Rockets, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Miami Heat. In my opinion, it's going to be the Houston Rockets. He does know Chris Paul pretty well. They're really great friends, so I really see Carmelo Anthony going to the Houston Rockets. He also knows LeBron James pretty well. That could be another potential place that Carmelo Anthony goes and plays with the Lakers as well, but I really do see it being the Rockets, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So the Denver Nuggets agreed on a 3-year deal worth over $4 million to keep guard Monte Morris. So Morris will be remaining with the Nuggets. So the Phoenix Suns were trying to make multiple moves on moving on or trading Tyson Chandler to another team. But according to reports, the Phoenix Suns do not want to buy out Tyson Chandler's contract, so I don't know if they're going to end up keeping Tyson Chandler. So Michael Beasley will be moving on from the New York Knicks. He will be joining the Los Angeles Lakers. Beasley agreed to a deal to play for the Lakers. So during the season at the NBA trade deadline, The Lakers wanted to move on from Luol Deng and get rid of his contract so they could have more cap space in acquiring other free agents this offseason. So it looks like that the Lakers are still having a hard time trying to move on from Luol Deng, and they might have to land up keeping him or doing something later on this season. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So there's another rumor with Dwayne Wade. Last year he landed up signing and going to play with LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, but he landed up getting traded at the deadline. He landed up going back to his home and his team, the Miami Heat. But now this offseason, Dwayne Wade is a free agent, and there's been rumors that the Chinese teams in China are interested in acquiring Dwayne Wade. There's been no word or say if Dwayne Wade is interested in going and playing overseas in China. He's still looking at options of he wants to go play in China, try to test free agency and see if a team will pick him up, or he's maybe even considering retiring. So last season could have been the last time we've seen Dwayne Wade play in the NBA or even play basketball. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Doesn't really look like the Miami Heat are trying to offer him any contracts or anything like that. So a team in China is trying to make an offer to Dwayne Wade to see if he'll come play for them, but I haven't heard anything from Dwayne Wade, so I don't know if he's going to decide to go play in China, test free agency, or just retire. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So before Isaiah Thomas got his injury, he was playing for the Boston Celtics. At that time, and making it into the offseason, Isaiah Thomas would have landed up being one of the highest paid guards and players in the NBA. He would have landed up getting a max contract with the Boston Celtics, but because of his injury, he landed up leaving the Boston Celtics and getting traded, and the Celtics didn't want to pick him back up, so they moved on from Isaiah Thomas. Last year, he started out the season playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And then at the NBA trade deadline, he landed up getting traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. But because that was only a one-year deal, Isaiah Thomas became a free agent this offseason. He landed up signing a veteran's minimum contract of over $2 million to join the Denver Nuggets. So right now, Isaiah Thomas is on a one-year deal worth over $2 million to play for the Denver Nuggets this season. But there's been rumors that Isaiah Thomas would like to reunite and have a return and go play for the Boston Celtics. So if Isaiah Thomas were to become a free agent this summer, which would actually be next summer, after the end of the NBA season, Isaiah Thomas would be looking forward to and is willing to reunite and go back to playing for the Boston Celtics. Isaiah Thomas plays with the Denver Nuggets this year. That will probably be the determining factor if Isaiah Thomas will be making a return to. It's been another rumor that Carmelo Anthony's first choice will be playing for the Houston Rockets, and Carmelo Anthony is expected to sign with the Houston Rockets once he becomes a free agent. Also, like I said earlier, Dirk Nowitzki will be playing another season with the Dallas Mavericks. It's a one-year deal. Dirk Nowitzki is definitely a Mavericks legend. And another record too is not too many players can play their entire career for one team and by the team that they got drafted by, which Dirk Nowitzki will be able to say that He got to play for the team that drafted him. He got to play his whole entire career for the team that he's played for his entire career. So Dirk Nowitzki will be returning to the Dallas Mavericks. It will be a team record of 21 seasons. So Dirk Nowitzki, congrats to you. 21 seasons with the same team, the Dallas Mavericks. You're an NBA champion, NBA legend. So I'm glad that you get to remain with the Dallas Mavericks. Let's see how you do this year. And if this is your last year, congrats to you. You're one of the best players. You're one of my favorite players. So in the last few days, like I told you about Dwayne Wade, now the team in China has offered him a 3-year deal worth $25 million. That deal would actually be worth more than what a team here in the NBA would want to pay him. So if he were to decide to go play in China, he would make more money than what he would be making here in the NBA if he were to stick around another season here in the NBA or only be signed to a 1-year deal. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. It's kind of unlikely that Dwayne Wade would leave the NBA. He would probably just retire from the NBA, but no word from Dwayne Wade what his decision is, so we'll have to wait and see. Kevin Love will not be leaving the Cleveland Cavaliers, even though they lost LeBron James in free agency this offseason. The Cleveland Cavaliers signed Kevin Love to a 4-year deal worth over $120 million, so he will be remaining with the Cavaliers. Since the Cleveland Cavaliers signed Kevin Love to an extension to remain with the Cavaliers next focus is to sign Larry Nance Jr. to an extension contract to have Larry Nance Jr. remain with Kevin Love, and so they can remain together with the Cavaliers. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So a lot of rumors and reports say that Dwayne Wade needs to make a decision soon. The free agency started back on July 1st and it's already July 28th. So I really think that Dwayne Wade needs to make a decision soon. If he's just going to retire, announce it. If he's going to play another season, announce it. Just do it sometime soon. It's almost going to be a month since the beginning of NBA free agency. So Vince Carter will be turning 42 this season. Vince Carter is another NBA legend as well. And because he's that age, he's not ready to retire yet. So Vince Carter will be agreeing to a 1-year deal worth over $2 million to play another season in the NBA. Him and Dirk Nowitzki got drafted in the same draft back in 1998. Vince Carter and Dirk Nowitzki were drafted in the 1998 NBA draft. They're the only 2 players that have remained in the NBA that long, and they're the only 2 players from that draft class to still be playing in the NBA. So Vince Carter signed a 1-year veterans minimum contract worth over $2 million. So he will be playing next season with the Atlanta Hawks. Just like Dirk Nowitzki, last year I thought Vince Carter, that would be the last time I got to see him play. That would maybe be his final season in the NBA, but this season might be Vince Carter's final season in the NBA. So if you're a fan of Vince Carter, you get to see him for another year. This might be his final year in the NBA, so I highly recommend to watch Vince Carter play in the NBA. So at the NBA trade deadline last year, the Denver Nuggets ended up moving Emmanuel Mudiay to the New York Knicks, but they had to do a 3-team trade, which involved the Dallas Mavericks, and the Denver Nuggets sent Emmanuel Mudiay to the New York Knicks, and Dallas Mavericks sent Devin Harris to the Denver Nuggets. Devin Harris was really good when he was here with the Denver Nuggets, and it helped that they needed a backup guard towards the end of the season to try to see if the Nuggets would have a chance of making it into the playoffs, which they fell very short of making the playoffs. But this offseason, the Dallas Mavericks did want Devin Harris back and to return to the Dallas Mavericks, so they landed up agreeing to a 1-year veterans minimum contract, so Devin Harris will be going back. So the Houston Rockets didn't want to move on from Clint Cabral, so Cabral will be remaining and staying with the Houston Rockets. So the Houston Rockets and Cabral agreed to a 5-year deal worth over $90 million. So Cabral will be staying with the Rockets. So that's the current moves that have been happening around NBA free agency. There's a lot of other moves that could take place, players that could be on the move. So there could be other contract extensions for players, other max deals that could be signed, or players that could be traded. So a lot could still happen, so I would stay tuned. So today I talked about the All-Star Game festivities, the NBA free agency. I gave you the up-to-date news of what's been going on around the NBA. So heading into next week, the Major League trade deadline is coming up on July 31st, so that's coming up pretty soon. There's other players that are going to be on the move as well from teams that are going to be contending for a playoff spot, so stay tuned for that. Believe it or not, football is going to be back. Football is just around the corner. It starts in August with preseason football, and then in September the regular season starts. If you're a fan and you like to attend training camp starts next week as well. Usually the second to last week of July. NFL training camp starts. Every team reports to training camp, so that's coming up as well. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that watches every episode of All Sports. Until next time, this is Gerardo.